Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners. In today's episode, we talk about some pretty deep, sensitive issues. So listeners should be advised that we talk about suicide, abuse, sexual assault, and other sensitive topics. So if that's not for you, please give this episode a miss. If you need help, please reach out to organizations like RAINN, RAINN, if you need assistance.
Hey, listeners, you know we've got a Patreon, right? Where supporters get early access to all our podcasts, bonus episodes, discounts on merch, and access to the Feminist Frequency Discord? Well, now you do. Get all this fun stuff while supporting our show at patreon.com/femfreak. That's FEMFREQ.
There's no right answer. There's no easy answer, except safe, legal, free abortion on demand. I'm going to say that maybe 47 more times during this episode.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is a show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by a woman who is the last person you should trust to navigate a road trip for vital medical care. Ebony Adams. I almost forgot your name. Actually, this isn't true. This is the biggest of lies.
I don't know that I could safely get you across state lines.
No, but you can safely escort people to get abortions.
That is true. That is true.
Ebony was a volunteer for a long time.
I used to work volunteer for clinic escorting and clinic defense. And I'd be happy to share information with people if you want to hit me up on my Twitter.
Hell yeah. All right, let's play a clip.
I didn't see you at school today.
I went to the doctor.
What's wrong?
Girl problems.
Don't you ever just wish you were a dude?
All the time.
This is the most magical sound you will ever hear.
Down beneath the ashes and stone.
I'm just not ready to be a mom.
Where else could you go?
Nowhere in Pennsylvania.
I think you should try another place.
Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is the haunting story of a pregnant teen's journey to get an abortion in a neighboring state. The critically acclaimed film, which came out in 2020, was directed by Eliza Hittman and stars Sydney Flanagan in her debut as the pregnant Autumn. The muted palette of the film is a striking mirror of the dreary reality of Autumn's life. Her pregnancy is a burden she cannot and will not bear, and her attempts to terminate it by swallowing pills or punching her stomach are harrowing to watch. Such torturous scenes are surrounded by so much additional everyday trauma, such as the unwanted attention and touches from horrible men that she and her friend experience daily. The film is a profoundly affecting and unflinching depiction of the choices or lack of choices faced by too many in our society. Joining us to talk about this incredibly upbeat movie is writer and podcaster KAT SPADA.
Hello.
Thanks for coming back.
I'm going to bring the energy up. I'm just going to keep us pumping.
Well, listen, I swung between absolute despair and blinding fury in this movie. You know, I said before we got started recording, this is one of those films that's so good, but I don't think I could ever watch it again. It took me through the emotional ringer and the impotence I felt to protect these two young girls made it hard to watch in one go. You know, this is one of the challenges of watching stuff at home versus in a theater. In a theater, I would not have been able to leave. Well, I mean, obviously I could have left, but I wouldn't have probably gotten up from my seat. But at home, I could take the opportunity, thank goodness, to stop and sort of gather my thoughts, because there were moments that were so brutal to watch. And I just felt like crying.
Yeah, this movie is fucking torturous and brilliant.
Yeah, so good.
You know, I think this movie is remarkable, actually legitimately remarkable. I didn't know anything about it. I was scrambling to find a movie for us to watch and was like, this sounds interesting. And the ways that it captures, this is one of those movies that is really takes in the visuals of film, right? There's very little dialogue at the end of the day, and it's just very much the journey, the day in the life and the journey of these two young women, these two teenagers. And I think it captures the disconnectedness of teens. I think it captures the disempowerment of teens, in addition to patriarchy, in addition to the not having control of your body and the things that are happening, or not being able to have control of your body. Like all of that melds together in the quietest of ways in this film. I think it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's a very close movie. Like there's, one or two characters in a scene at a time, and it makes me feel acutely the sense of feeling small that I think is very keenly true of, like, at least I that wasn't like my pervasive experience of being a teenage girl, but it's so, like, I felt that way again watching this movie, that I remember feeling the first time I was catcalled from a car when I was waiting outside of my high school or something like that. The ways that you have to just retreat inside yourself, because what other option is there? And that's like, thinking about comparing to movies like 13, or there's sort of bombastic movies about like being a teenage girl who's in peril. Like this is it feels more perilous because it just kind of quietly keeps going. I think that's makes it so hard to watch.
I would not have been surprised at the end of the film if the two girls, Autumn and her cousin, were mugged in New York and then were not able to get home. Like, it's the accumulation of horrible but everyday things. This is not a film in which there's an alien invasion. This is not a film in which there are jewel heists. It is a quiet film, but it is filled with all of the petty indignities and banal bad luck that plague all of us, but that certain people are particularly vulnerable and susceptible to. So teenagers, young people, people who can get pregnant. It's just, although this film is, about a young girl who discovers that she is pregnant, gets horrible criminal advice from a crisis pregnancy center, and then luckily continues to get the information she needs to get the abortion she needs without her parents knowing. Although it is about that is not all that is going on in Autumn's life, or her, and I'm blanking on her cousin's name.
Skylar, I think.
Yeah, Skylar, thank you. So from the beginning, Autumn's horrible relationship with her father, the gross dude that Skylar serves in the grocery store where they work, who tries to invite her to a party, the disgusting manager who touches their fingers as they cash out.
Yeah, we need to put in this long list that's going to take the rest of the podcast of all of the trash men in this movie.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right? Like, it's more than just the abortion, right? Like, it's totally, there's so much.
Okay, the boss that makes out with their hands when they turn in the money, like, what could you, and I was so confused. So in the scene, if you haven't seen the movie, they work as cashiers at a grocery store, and they count their money, and then they like put it under a slot in a counter to the manager that's in the back, or a person in the back. And when they do, he grabs their hand and like makes out with it. And then I was like, oh, is that some weird gross thing with Skylar? And then he does it again with oh my God, what's her name? What's the protagonist? Autumn, thank you. And you're just like, oh, this is their everyday. And their faces are just resigned to it, right? It's not like they're shocked. It's not like they're concerned. They're just like, this is what life is. And I lost it. It was like, oh.
Yeah, and then just the final one I wanted to mention is the dude from the bus that they meet. So on the way to New York, they are sat across from the aisle from this fucking chucklehead who has taken a shine to Skylar, and in typical chucklehead fashion, presses his attentions on her, despite the fact that she is giving every verbal and nonverbal signal that she is not into this dude, does not want to pursue him, or is not receptive to his pursuit. But then as, events occur in the film and the girls get more and more desperate, and their relationship, has a temporary bump. Skylar reaches out to this dude. She texts him. They go out. They go, dragging their huge suitcase, right? Everywhere they go bowling. They do karaoke. When Skylar finally says, hey, we lost our tickets. Could we borrow some money? And you know what he is ultimately going to demand for that money. And the fact that Skylar does it, if I don't start crying on this podcast, it will be a fucking miracle. I wanted to reach into my screen and beat up every fucking dude I saw. And I wanted to adopt these two girls and take them away to a paradise in the desert where no one could ever touch them again.
So in that scene, Skylar and Autumn get separated because Skylar is being asked to do sexual favors in return for money for the bus fare. When Autumn finally finds her and she like quietly walks up and just like reaches over and holds her hand while she's being abused, or while she's I would call it abuse because she's being forced into this situation. That was it. Like it's not, it's just I know you have to do this for me, and us really in this moment. And I'm here for you through this horrible thing. Like it was.
Yeah. The compounding of the injustices that put people in those positions. If you haven't seen the film, which I highly suggest you watch, but please be in a healthy mental space when you watch it, because you're going to take a lot of knocks. But they are trying to get $125, like $66 a piece. Such a small amount. And what Skylar has to trade for that small amount of money is incalculable. And what Adam knows is happening and what she's going to have to bear in that knowledge.
And I walked away from that being like, they're both like this trip, life in general, but there are these, like the trauma, they're both walking away with severe trauma from this situation, right? Like this is forever. This is a forever thing for both of them.
I think that's what so makes it about. It's all circling around the abortion and having to cross state lines on their own to access it. But it's that knowledge that like submission is an ever-present part of their lives. Like they've borne trauma before this. They are likely to continue to bear trauma after this. We don't know who impregnated Autumn. It might be somebody that she's in danger of becoming pregnant again by, or becoming abused, raped by in the future. It's left sort of up to your imagination, which makes it so scary. But like that sense, and I think that's what makes it, I'd be curious. Well, I think that's what makes it so relatable, even if you haven't been in this exact situation, is that like every step they take to try to improve their situation has its own, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It has its own perils or its own costs that they know taking those steps is going to have to bear. You want to have a job so you can get a little cash to help out your family? Well, you're going to have to deal with this creepy boss. You want to finally feel like yourself performing, singing and playing guitar at the school talent show. Well, some guy in the audience is going to call you a slut, and then you're going to have to see him at the pizza shop after, because there's only so many pizza shops that you can go to. Like, it's just part of it. And it's that, I think, is so, that's unrelenting. I mean, they could have never had to go to New York, but like, even the fact that this movie is about, okay, we can get on a bus, we can go to the big city. It's not, it's maybe an overnight trip, but that comes with its own set of challenges. Like, there is no door that they can open that is just going to solve problems.
Right.
It's going to always come with more problems. That's what I think is the like real threat.
Yeah. I mean, when they make it to New York, the first facility that Autumn goes to is a Planned Parenthood in Brooklyn. She finds out that she is further along in her pregnancy than she has been taught at that crisis pregnancy center. And the facility that she has first gone to is not able to perform the procedure. And not only that, it's not going to be a one-day procedure. She's not going to be able to immediately go home. Now she has to find her way to a different clinic, she has to be asked, she has to run the gauntlet of the questions that are demanded of her again from someone else that's new. She and Skylar do not have the money, or the wherewithal to get to a safe place. It's as you say, like, it's unrelenting. Every time you turn one corner, there's another fucking Donkey Kong ready to punch you in the head.
There's something around the fact that she won't accept help, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I thought she's in such a delicate, vulnerable, traumatized state that she's like blocked completely off. And we don't know how long she's been in that state, like probably far beyond the pregnancy, where when the people at the clinic, the Planned Parenthood clinic, the real clinic, not the fake clinic, are like, do you need housing? We can help with that. Do you need that? Like, she won't accept it, and she won't admit that vulnerability. And which, as a viewer, you're like, just fucking say you have nowhere to go. They can help you, and just will not open up that way. And then you see this other scene, which is where the name comes from, where they ask her to answer a series of questions, and the answers are either never, rarely, sometimes, always. And that scene is amazingly well done, and is the most heartbreaking, I think, I mean, the whole movie's heartbreaking, but that scene I really think cements it and really roots us in the reality of her life. And, she can't, like, she is being forced to answer questions about her sexual history, which is clearly like involved a lot of abuse and non-consensual experiences. And she knows that she has to answer them in order to get the procedure to not be pregnant anymore, right? And it's torture. And it's a stranger in the room. Like, she probably hasn't told anyone about these experiences. Also, with her dad or stepdad, I just kept waiting for it to be him. Like, I just kept waiting for it to be him. And they didn't say that. They didn't go there. But like,
I'm gonna have to
Kat, like
walk
you said,
around the block after this. Seriously, y'all, this movie put me through the ringer. Eliza Hittman, bow down. This woman did the thing.
And that scene is shot fairly unconventionally with the I'm not sure what her title would be, but at the clinic support provider, right?
Yeah, she's the counselor.
I know that woman was an actual counselor, like that was not an actor. And the scene is just camera still on Sydney Flanagan's face. And she comes to tears and she's quiet and she looks 11 years old. I mean, she looks like a baby. And that is such a moment. I feel like I've seen it, and drag me, like I've watched SVU for the last like 45 years of my life, like
so sorry.
Yeah. Or in the show, the Netflix series Unbelievable, where the moment when someone is at their most vulnerable is when they have to answer all of the questions and they have to be the most mentally acuitous that they've ever been. And that is obviously an impossible task for anybody who's been through a trauma. But that she is just sitting there, on trial, even if it's just in her own mind, she's on trial. This counselor is not doing anything that implies that she's passing judgment or that it's going to limit her ability to get the procedure or that it's going to, that she's in trouble. But there's a line there where she says, "Why are you asking me this?" And it's like, she can't even wrap her head around, like, well, this woman's trying to help you. She's trying to ask you if you need help, but it's just like, why are you putting me on the spot? It's horrible. And at the same time, it's like, I want to sit there and kind of hold her hand and say, hey, these are important questions about medical history, but like nothing, you didn't do anything wrong. And there's just no time for that. She's in a crisis.
There's, I was so, glad that counselor is presented in the way that she is, because God bless the people in these positions, who offer this compassionate care, who share like facts and truth, but also, humanity to pregnant people in these spaces. And so, Anita, you mentioned Autumn being unable to accept help. And so she is offered the chance to connect with a volunteer who could perhaps get her someplace to stay for the night, and she's unable to take it. And at the same time that you're like, just take it, I am also so glad that the decision was not made for her, because the people who work in these facilities know you have to empower these people. Every choice has to be theirs. You cannot force anything on them. And ultimately, if they decide they don't want to go through with the procedure, even if you suspect that it would be absolutely the right thing, you cannot make that choice for them. But it's hard watching a 17-year-old bear this burden and, shoulder this on her own, and face this barrage of what feels like a barrage of questions, but ultimately are necessary. If you have a duty of care to a community, these are the things that you have to ask. And there's no easy way to do it. There's no way to avoid it. I've been listening to a story from a woman who had been trafficked in her youth and had gone to an abortion facility for, I think, 11 procedures in a fairly short amount of time. And she was not asked these kinds of questions. And she says, I just, wanted someone to ask me, I knew they wouldn't be judging me, but I just needed someone to ask me a little bit like probing questions so that I had permission to then speak it out loud. There's no right answer. There's no easy answer, except safe, legal, free abortion on demand. I'm going to say that maybe 47 more times during this episode. I'm going to interrupt people.
So we did an episode last season with Rachel Lee Goldenberg and Liz Winstead about abortion in America in its current state. And I, as I was watching this, I thought it was interesting to contrast with Rachel's film Unpregnant, which takes the opposite, like complete opposite position, not position at all. It's the opposite tact of like, let's make a buddy movie, like a road trip movie about it, right? And it's equally as fucked up, but it's a different way of presenting this information to an audience. And I'm pleased that there are all these different, part of what we talked about on that is that there isn't a lot of media about abortion. And there isn't a lot of media about like celebration of and joy of, and like, this is the best thing ever for me kind of thing. But that I like that there are these different perspectives, right? There's a lot of stuff in this movie that I think, an average person in the US that doesn't know that much about reproductive health would be really surprised about, and like, be able to create a little bit of empathy in this scenario.
Yeah.
Compassion.
There were those two movies, and then there was the movie Plan B, which is like a much kind of broader comedy about two teenage girls who are seeking the morning after pill. So it's like slightly, maybe it's completely out of left field for me to say lower stakes, but in that situation, you kind of feel a little more comfortable going into those high comedy moments because it's kind of telegraphed that at the end of the day, if they can't get to the clinic to get Plan B as a minor, she's going to be able to talk to her mom and get it. Like, that there's kind of the out. But that, comparing this movie and Unpregnant, like, what's very interesting about this one is how little we know about these girls. A lot of times the story is told with, we want you to know what their socioeconomic background is. We want you to know there is abuse, unquestionably, this is the abuser, or this is the guy at school who got her pregnant, who won't stand up for her, whatever it is. And what we know is that these are white girls. They are able to get some cash together to travel across state lines. And it's still impossibly difficult. And they don't have physical or developmental disabilities, as far as we can tell. Like, there are so many ways it could be even harder for them to take the first step in both of these stories. And it seems that's the thing. It's like, oh, at least she only has to go from Pennsylvania to New York. She doesn't have to go like 5 states over. And it's hard to wrap my head around it, really to think. And And to think that like you don't even have anyone you can turn to except to subtly hint to your cousin that you work with. Like she never even really says, here's what I need at any point. To your point, Ebony, that like, would that mean that she's acknowledging that she's a victim of some sort? And maybe that's not possible for her.
Yeah.
Ebony, you mentioned this in the intro, but the like ways that she was trying to have at-home abortions.
Oh boy.
Like the desperation. Did anyone watch Yellow Jackets?
I haven't watched it yet.
Okay, there's a scene in Yellow Jackets that reminds me of this, right? Like the desperation of like trying to get rid of a fetus on your own and watching her, like, I'm like, she's gonna just drink a bunch of vitamin C. Is that a thing? Like she read it online somewhere. I was like, she's just gonna have the runs. Like I don't know what's gonna happen here. And then when she just starts beating herself up, you're like, and then they do this beautiful thing in the film. Beautiful, I mean, just like filmic wise, where they cut to her having the ultrasound, no, the sonogram, and she's just bruised up, and nobody says anything. That's, I think, is one of the beautiful things about this movie, Kat, is that like there's so little context, and it is not needed because you know enough to understand what's happening. It doesn't need to be spoken at every moment, right?
You mentioned if you had to see this in theaters, like it would have been a harder experience. The last time and one of the few times I've ever walked out of a movie theater was to see the Ukrainian movie The Tribe from 2014. I was interested in seeing this movie. It was hard to find when it came out because it takes place at a school for the deaf. And it's, I'd kind of gotten the impression it was like kids, it was that kind of teens doing drugs and having sex and getting into trouble, but that there were no subtitles, that it would be entirely in Ukrainian sign language. And all the reviews I'd read were like, this is still a super compelling movie and you can completely follow it, even though you don't know what the dialogue is. And there is a portrayal of like a kind of a backwoods abortion. And I could not tolerate it. It was so horrible. It was so horrible to watch. And I am so grateful that but this movie, I felt the same way. I felt just as horrible without seeing something that was devastating, medically devastating. Instead, seeing something that was safe and healthy medical care. It was just like, there is no, I wondered at what point did this young girl lose her freedom, her ability to just be a kid. Like that is just completely gone. And that I think is that's the thing that sits with me, having seen this so long ago and just reminding myself like, yeah, I'll never forget what that feels like. And the movies like this just do an incredible job of portraying it.
When you were talking, both of you, about this film and other films that came out around the same period, Plan B, Unpregnant, about reproductive issues, it makes me furious that we don't have even more media that is very straightforward about these issues, that tackles it, in a host of different ways. So yes, kind of broad comedy, or, a dreary drama, or, whatever, right? Anita and I recorded an episode for next season's podcast with Dr. Shelley Stamp talking about early Hollywood history. And one of the things that Shelley mentions is that there were films, just a number of films in the 1910s and 1920s about abortion, directed by women. And it was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. These were incredibly popular movies. Can you imagine the reception? First of all, you would never get more of these greenlit. I am amazed that a film like Never Really, Sometimes, Always got made, not just because of its subject matter, but as you say, Anita, it is a movie that really embraces its cinematic existence, right? So it is primarily visual. And as the credits started rolling, I was like, but I wonder what the screenplay for this looked like, you know? Because how do you sell this story? You know, like there's going to be a lot of close-ups. There's going to be a lot of sad looks. There's going to be some hand touches. You know, it's very uncomfortable in this scene. It's heartwarming. But how do you sell this? Thank God, you know, Eliza Hittman and, you know, her producers were able to make this happen. But yeah, I want young pregnant people especially to know everything there is to know, you know?
I want media where people have abortions on their fucking lunch break as a like C plot, where it's just like, oh, I'll be right back. I gotta go take care of something in a movie about like a heist or, you know, like I want loads more movies about abortion. Like, don't get me wrong, but I want it to be like a thing that just is like, I gotta go run to the store for a second really quick in the middle of whatever this is.
Are you saying that you want to see depictions of safe, legal, free abortions on demand, Anita?
Yes.
Yes.
That is what I'm saying, 100%. And I think that's related to, was it like Tweet Your Abortion was a hashtag that was started by someone who was having a going through an abortion procedure and being like, step by step, this is what's happening, like to demystify all of the myth around abortion and around like the scariness of it, because it's actually not. In many cases, it's not a incredibly invasive procedure. Like I think a lot of mythology shares that it is. I want to talk about this crisis pregnancy center.
Ooh.
So years ago, Feminist Frequency made a video about crisis pregnancy centers, so we can share that. But as soon as you walk in, you're like, huh, what is this place? And I was still giving it the benefit of the doubt. And then when she's like, is that just a supermarket pregnancy test? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, huh, that's shady. So these crisis pregnancy centers pretend to be like actual clinics, reproductive health clinics. And they're there to try and stop young people or people from getting abortions, right? So they bring you in, they do tests, they do sonograms, they fucking lie to you about how far along you are. They show you these horror videos about abortion and how you're going to hell for having them. Like these are real and they exist all over this country.
Anita, do you remember when we were doing that episode about crisis pregnancy centers? And at the same time, there was that billboard up, I think in your neighborhood, that was like, had an abortion, it's not too late. And it would crack us up because we were like, what do you mean it's not too late?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
And it was right above the Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
It was right above the Planned Parenthood. Yeah. One, that makes no sense, but it's probably some save your soul bullshit.
And when I say these people, provide criminal care, first of all, what they're providing is not care, but they're being criminally responsible for bad decisions against, people's wishes. So they tell Autumn that she is approximately 10 weeks pregnant. It turns out she's actually 18 weeks pregnant. And you assume that the reason why they have told her that she is 10 weeks pregnant is because then she will assume she has more time to get an abortion. And she will then, when she tries to go get the procedure, she will find that she has run out of time. She's actually further along than she thought, and will not be able to get that procedure. She is also, once she, tells the quote unquote counselor in the crisis pregnancy center that she believes she wants an abortion, is forced to sit there and watch this horrific anti-choice fucking VHS bullshit, oh my God, the fury in that moment.
There's the insidiousness of when she's getting the ultrasound and the woman says, this is the most magical sound you'll ever hear. Mm-hmm. And I think about the layers that could re-traumatize someone throughout their life. Like, let's say in 15 years, she's trying to get pregnant and, now has this horrible memory associated with this experience. Like, who knows what her future will be, but the presumption that all women go through one type of lived experience, or all women, all people with uteruses can have one type of experience. And it just completely neuters and removes any other aspect of her humanity.
Mm-hmm. Did I mishear this? Or when she says that, this is the best sound you'll ever hear, doesn't like the director kind of undercut it? Because then the sound we hear, it's a heartbeat, right? But it's very mechanical and kind of wheezy. It's not, the sort of like Disney-fied, soft, gentle, the thump. It's like, or whatever. And I just thought that was very well done, just like brushing off that bullshit. This is the most beautiful sound you'll ever hear.
Yeah. I said this already, but I think one of the things that's so powerful about this movie is how really she nailed teenagers. Like, she gives herself a piercing. Like, we've all tried to do that or some variation of that, and I'm watching it being like, oh my God, stop it. And like, there's so many moments that I just want to shake them and be like, dude, don't be different. Right. And you feel, it's like, Ebony, you were saying, you feel helpless. Like you want to protect them and you want to like guide them. And, teenagers don't listen. We don't like, why would we? One, we're totally disempowered. When we were teenagers, none of us are currently teenagers anymore, but you're totally disempowered. And also you have to experience things on your own. But that like the combination of like, experiencing things for the first time and like, feeling like you don't have any control in life, and just the ways that they talk to people, what they're willing to share and not share and do and not do. And like, I feel like she really nailed the energy of these fucking teens.
Oh yeah, and that's what makes it additionally horrible when Skylar is dealing with that fuck dude from the bus, right? Because when he says like, hey, do you want to go get a drink? And she lies and says, oh, I'm not 21 yet. Oh, how old are you? I'm 20. I was like, dude, she's not 20. Everything about her affect and the affect of that girl behind her tells you that they are teenagers. You know it, and you are pursuing her anyway. And I want to kick you in the face.
It was gross.
I just saw Sashir Zamata do stand-up the other day, and she was talking about like somebody making a comment to her if she was going to go alone to a bar that she might learn a lesson the hard way. And she was like, at my age, I've learned my lessons the hard way. And I don't, thinking about that again, like how in my 20s, the ways in which I would try to be nice and amenable to strange men, because that seemed like the most likely way to ensure my safety, when that was absolutely against my instincts. But it's those lessons that you kind of have to learn by being placed in danger, which is to be out in the world. And how many tools, if you haven't taught your kid how to tie their shoes, you failed them. Like how many tools are we supposed to be raised with that we're not? And I had a very unusual upbringing. I went to all girls school until I went to college, and my school had an extremely comprehensive sex ed also. It was like very straightforward about everything. Then when I got to college at 17, I had meeting boys for the first time and being completely gobsmacked by them not being what I expected at all. But also,
sorry.
I was like, how delightful it will be to finally have a meeting of the minds with the other sex.
Were you the teenage girl version of Fedora Guy? Hello, my lady.
You have 100% accuracy. I literally tipped an imaginary hat like the first time I went to like a freshman seminar. And one person laughed, and he was my friend. But also I remember meeting people who didn't know stuff about how people got pregnant. And that was kind of shocking to me, because even though I was like a completely sheltered nerd, I had been taught important information. And like, if you think I didn't draw a few diagrams for my friends and like, run a tampon under the sink so that a 18-year-old boy would be forced to confront like the absorbency. I was like, what do you mean they leave it in all week? This is crazy. I got to talk to you about stuff. But consequently, like bringing friends to get the morning after pill because they didn't know. And even though I didn't have much lived experience, I had education. And that was, I hope, helped a few people to just pay it forward with like, oh, here's something I was taught in school. I can bring you to the health center and we can talk. Like, or if, I remember just the phrasing around consent was not something anybody really understood, but at least we were talking about it. And that I think is already so powerful, just to be able to say like, well, this happened. I don't know how I feel about it, is already so much more agency than just being like, I can't say anything. There's nothing to say.
Yeah. God, this movie.
I'm obsessed. I'm going to call your mom and ask for any teenage pictures of you that I haven't yet seen, because you have shown me some doozies, some absolutely amazing cat history.
What direction are these photos? Like, I need a little bit of context. Like punk, goth, like Catholic schoolgirl.
Well, I'll let Kat say, but I would say for me, there's Odeur de Hot Topic in there.
Yeah.
That really just chef's kiss,
Okay,
the
we'll have
low
to trade some
slung
photos.
pants, the studded belt.
Yeah, there was definitely a fishnet glove or two.
Oh, we would have totally been friends. 100%. 100%. All right. I think we all highly recommend this movie, but watch it when you are prepared to watch it. Now that we're saying this at the end of the podcast, that you've probably already seen it or whatever, but it's not. It's a bring tissues and a little emotional armor with you.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, we will be back with some freakouts.
We all need a little emotional support from time to time, but don't always have the resources or access to the support that understands us. I know it would have been life-changing if during the height of the online abuse against me, to have anyone else who understood what I was going through. That's why me and my team built the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. We provide free, confidential, emotional support for people who make and play games. Because we are people who make and play games too, and we get it. You can learn more by texting info to 23368 from anywhere in the US, or visit gameshotline.org. That's info to 23368 or gameshotline.org.
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Who's got a freak out?
I've got one.
Hell yeah.
So this week, I got to speak to Tracy Curry, who is co-director of the documentary Attica, which is nominated for an Academy Award, Best Documentary Feature. It's available to watch on YouTube for free. You can watch it on Amazon, and I encourage everyone to see it. So if you don't know anything about it, or all you know is the name, about 50 years ago, a little over 50 years ago in Attica, which is upstate New York, at the correctional facility there was the largest and bloodiest uprising to date at a prison that predominantly housed Black and brown men, in which all of the guards, all of the administration was white. And during the course of this prison riot, these incarcerated men took these, hostages from the guards to try and demand such basic things: soap, more food, access to schooling, religious freedom, the freedom to practice their religion, and, an end to the horrific abuse they experienced as inmates. The The uprising, the taking over of the prison lasted for around 5 days and then was brutally repressed by the forces of the state, largely directed by people like Governor Nelson Rockefeller, under advisement from President Nixon. I believe 39 prisoners ultimately died, and 10 of the hostages. There was a lie for many years that the inmates had cut the throats of some of the hostages. And so law enforcement was justified in going in to take back the prison. Ultimately, medical examiners determined that all of the prisoners who died because of police gunfire. So that's the story of what is covered in Attica. It is just this expertly done remapping of history to include something that should never have been forgotten, that needs to be more well known. We need to know about the kinds of wrongs that are being done in our name. We need to really reckon with the power that we have invested in the prison industrial complex, the economies that are supported by the subjugation and surveillance of Black and brown bodies. And so you have these men telling their stories, these men who were former inmates of Attica, who are now in their 70s, 80s, 90s, who are able sometimes to speak about this, what happened, with such clarity, but also still brought so low 50 years later by what they experienced. And this film is unflinching. This was a hard week of film watching for old Ebbs, let me tell you. But it is so good. And I mean, filmically, it's fantastic. Thematically, it's fantastic. There's stuff being done with the archival footage in this film, and then the layering of, sound from the era with sound from men, recounting their memories. That is just, it's absolutely fantastic. So please do your old pal Ebbs a favor. Check out Attica. Again, you can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on Amazon. It's free. And just be blown away by the evil that men do.
Yeah, I did watch it, and it was startling how what I thought I knew about the story compared to what's portrayed. And there's a lot of footage in it that was surprising that existed, but how much the media was able to be involved was interesting. And, even to have the surviving child of one of the prison guards, acknowledge that there were Muslim prisoners who acted as bodyguards for the hostages, and whose nonviolence, was very key to how these men were standing up for themselves and their human rights. Definitely worth watching. Agree.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Kat, do you have a Freq Out that you'd like to?
Yeah, I'll repeat or reiterate a recommendation for the movie Plan B, which is on Hulu. So if you watch Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, and you're like, I never want to see a movie ever again about a girl, this is a nice little antidote to that, because it is like a really fun and funny buddy comedy. And also, I love when you have a couple of stars of a movie, and guess what? Not a single one of them has to be a white girl. It is a friendship between a South Asian American girl and a Mexican American girl, and they are going to find her some Plan B, and they live in South Dakota, so it's tough to find it as a minor. She goes to a pharmacy. The main actress is Kuhu Verma, and she doesn't feel confident asking for what she needs because the pharmacist is also Indian American. And she's like, oh no, the Indian network. He's going to tell someone and they're going to tell my mom. Like that sort of humor that's like woven into the actual drama of what's going on. But there's some kind of gross out humor. There's like LGBT issues. There's just the kind of fun of teens going to parties and going to a bowling alley and that sort of stuff. But one thing that really surprised me about this movie, and it's directed by Natalie Morales, is that religion is really interestingly present in this movie in a way that isn't, I think, typical for a movie about like sex and, you know, its ramifications. You have all of the characters are religious and they all have different religious traditions, and it's respected, but it's also not allowed to kind of drive the story in a way that I felt was like really true to life. So it's really fun. And there's a great scene of like two good girls trying to do a drug deal in a playground and not having any concept of like what to ask for or what the steps are that little old Hot Topic Kat would have completely identified with. So recommend that. It's on Hulu.
Nice. All right. Great. Well, you know, you can submit your own freak out at feministfrequency.com/FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. That is it for the end of this season, and we are sadly going to end with some sad news. Ebony is leaving. Ebony's leaving us.
I didn't know you wanted me to break the news.
I don't know. I feel sad. I'm sad about it. Carolyn left me. Ebony's leaving me. It's the end of an era.
I think both Carolyn and I were just like, it's time to let our baby bird fly.
Oh, yeah. That's what
and
happened.
Also, listen, as much as Carol and I love the podcast and really had fun doing it and think, you know, we added something. The fact is, Anita, let's be real. This whole thing is carried on your tiny shoulders. So people may mourn me for half a minute.
Whatever.
And then they'll be like, whatever.
I feel like I was really grateful that the two of you continued on doing this podcast for years after you were no longer employed at Feminist Frequency, because it made sense that we were all employed and we were doing this as a part of the work. So I'm grateful for the time that we had doing that. But never fear, faithful listeners. I will make sure that they both come back on regularly, and Ebony's already recorded episodes that are coming out next season. So
it was a real treat to just be a guest, y'all. I have to say, I acted up even more than normal.
That's not true. Anyways, so yeah, bye, Ebony. We love you. You're the best.
Thank you. I love you too.
You're also I'm not gonna let you go too far.
Okay.
Okay. So end of season, but. Actually, this is the best part. I'm just going to call Ebony out real quick. Ebony came up with the best fucking idea for a series and then was like, and then I planned the whole thing. And then Ebony was like, I got to go. I can't do that with you. Bye.
Cinema Ball 2.
Oh my gosh.
Man. I wish.
You're breaking my heart.
We still get requests for Cinema Ball, just so you know.
Of course you do.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Okay. So one of the things a couple of things are happening next season. Next season, we are celebrating our 200th episode. So that's a holy shit moment. And then also we're going to be doing this special series that's 7 weeks looking at Hollywood films by the decade. So we're bringing on an expert scholar, an expert to come and talk about what was happening in that decade. And we're going to watch some films from that time period to just, you know, get a sense of what it was like, what Hollywood was like, and how we got to where we got. So I'm really excited. We've already recorded a couple episodes of that, and it was going to be
so fucking good.
It's really, really good. So definitely tune in to that. Kat, we love you. Come back on.
We do.
Now that I have nobody.
Bring pictures.
I'll just be knocking on the door. Hey,
please.
Do you want to talk about movies?
Always. Always. Where can folks find out more about you?
Feel free to check me out at catexmachina.com. I say that because my Twitter is hard to say out loud, but it's just cat_ex_machina. And, you know, doing podcasting, I write essays. Those are posted at various sources from time to time. And now that the pandemic is doing whatever it's doing, probably will be doing a little bit more on stage as I had been doing in my life before this all happened. So maybe you'll see me at a storytelling show in LA one of these days.
I can't wait. That sounds amazing. All right, y'all. Our show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Barron, and our intro music by Phil Circus. See you next season, which is, you know, only a few weeks away now. Bye.
Bye.